Welcome to HomeWord. I'm Jim Burns, and if you're listening to this podcast or you watch it somewhat on a regular basis, well, you know I'm a girl dad. Never thought I'd do that. I was raised in a family of all boys, and we had sports, and we had dirt, and we had some fighting, like seriously fist fighting. Um, but to be honest, I love being a girl dad, and my girls. I mean, we had sports, some dirt, quite a bit of dirt on one of them, and some fighting, but it was usually not fist fighting. In fact, to be honest, I wondered if my girls would ever really like each other when they got to be adults, because there were those moments. They were best friends, and then they're 2 years apart, and then they would just like be so mad at them. But fortunately, our girls are now best friends, and we love hanging out together. Two of them are on vacation together with their husbands right now. We get to watch the grandkids starting in a couple of days, and it's a blessing to do this. Well, we're going to talk today, and Dad, you need to hear this too, but we're going to talk today on mother-daughter conversations about life and faith. Sandra Stanley and Allie Stanley Cooney are with us today, and they wrote a great book. And I'm proud to say that I read this book, even though it's for moms and daughters. It's called Meet Me in the Middle. If you're on the YouTube world, you can see it right here. And it has all kinds of notes in it from me. Anyway, I highly recommend it. I suggest that after the podcast, or hey, if you're a multitasker during the podcast, order the book. Don't do it if you're driving and listening to the podcast. That's too much multitasking. But I need to tell you also something right from the beginning. I absolutely adore Sandra Stanley. I love her heart for family. I love her wit and wisdom. She and her husband, Andy, wrote a book called Parenting, Get It Right, and I recommend it to everybody. I love that book, honestly, and I respect her so much. That actually I asked her to write the foreword of a book of mine on an empty nest, and she did a great job with that. And so it's an honor. Sandra and Andy founded North Point Community Church in 1995. And I actually was just telling them before the podcast started that I listen or I watch Andy several times a month, because he's not my pastor, but he is like my pastor. I quote him all the time in my head. And I'm just a fan. So there you go. Sandra graduated from Georgia Tech, Dallas Theological Seminary, and listen to this, drum roll. A lot of people don't know this about Sandra, but she is the graduate of Ursula's Cooking School in Atlanta. And that's pretty awesome. Okay, maybe we'll talk about that. Allie Stanley Cooney graduated from Auburn University and Dallas Theological Seminary. They've got the DTS thing going big time in their world. And as you read her part in this book, you will quickly see that she knows student ministry. She has a great background. She communicates so well to students, and it comes across on every page of the book. The book is written to moms and to daughters somewhat separately, and then there's some discussion stuff. Allie's married to Clay, and they have a toddler, and she has actually had moments of not remembering if she has brushed her teeth. I'm just not telling you a secret. It's in the book. So there you go. Welcome, Sandra and Allie. So good to have you with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
Well, as I said, I mean, I love your book. I love your stories in the book, especially. And I'm proud to say that I read it, like I said, cover to cover, with some estrogen seeping off the pages. I
That's
will
right.
admit that. It's for moms and daughters.
That's right. You may be one of the few men who read it cover to cover.
Maybe so. I know. I had
I
a
think
brown.
I read a lot of it too, Andy, as we were kind of processing through and getting it to the finish line. But
yeah.
But he didn't probably have them beat. Yep.
Well, that's good. I mean, I did it with a brown paper bag around it when I was
young. Right. The brown bagger book. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, I see this as so key. And Allie, I want to start off with you, and I just want to ask you this. I know that you are the youngest. When you were young, like a teenager yourself, what was your relationship like with your mom? And then Sandra, I'm going to ask you this question: what were your fears when she became a teenager? She's the youngest of the Stanley kids. Yeah. So Allie, how'd it go with her?
Yeah, growing up, so I have 2 older brothers.
Yes.
So when I was, elementary, middle school, I felt like my brothers were buddies and I was buddies with my mom. Like I had her, so that was really sweet. And then high school, there's definitely like a natural separation of I got more involved with my friends and I got a driver's license. And so I think that we felt that natural tension of me growing up and individuating, trying to be my own person, trying to have my own life, make my own decisions, be that independent type person. But I think because of the foundation that we had growing up being so close and her being such a safe place and such a trusted, not friend, but a trusted person that I could always go to, I think even in high school when I was kind of trying to individuate, I knew if something was going on, if I had fears or questions, I knew I could always go back to her.
No,
And
that's
so I
really cool.
think
So
most of that work was done when I
yeah.
was younger.
Yeah, right, and that makes sense, and, it's natural. I mean, individuation, it's interesting you even mentioned that because that's really the goal for you to become a responsible
Mhm.
adult on your own, and
Right.
if and a lot of moms have trouble with that, by the way,
Mhm.
because a lot of moms are like, "No, but they're getting older and they don't have their own friends, they're not, they're becoming their own people." No, that's what you're designed to do. And so for you to even use that term is
Mhm.
awesome. And yet I think when you become adults, like you both are now, obviously, maybe Sandra's not an adult. I don't know, but she is an adult. I don't know if she acts like one. But the point being, now you can almost be friends. At
Yeah.
least I'm
Mhm.
seeing that with my own wife and
Mhm.
and our daughters. And I really want one of our daughters. I honestly wondered, are they going to even like each other? Because we loved her, but I remember her saying even in college, I disowned my parents' faith to own my own faith, and that freaked
Mhm.
my wife out. Now we go to the same church. We, do everything together. I'm going to leave this podcast and go pick up the grandkids because Kathy just had back surgery, so I'm like the designated driver to do it. But the point being, that's what you want. So you guys are
Mhm.
you're our role model for that, and that doesn't always happen. Sandra, do you have any fears? She becomes a teenager. You know what teens do. You know that world. That was the world you and Andy, had been in years and
Right.
years ago.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It's funny, Jim. I don't think I realized until after Andy and I were married, oh no, I'm going to have preacher's kids. I mean, you
Right,
plan to have kids and all that. It wasn't, I didn't grow up in ministry like Andy did. And so
right,
that just didn't dawn on me. So
right.
there's a little bit of fear that comes along with that idea of, okay, there's a little bit of fear in all parenting
Yeah,
because you just you want to get it right so badly.
right.
You want your kids to have a faith of their own. There're just so many things and plates spinning and things that you want to get right. So there's always, I think, a little bit of anxiety
Sure.
around that. But then I thought, oh dear, I've got these now. I'm raising preachers' kids, and
Right.
there's such a reputation around preachers' kids
Sure.
and that whole thing. But as far as fear, especially as it related to Allie was a very easy child to parent.
Yeah.
Even though she and I are wired really differently, which I
Yeah.
think comes out in the
It
book
comes
pretty
out
good
in the book.
Mhm.
Yeah.
bit. We're wired so differently, but she was just a kind-hearted, um, she's been kind-hearted her whole life, and she's
Yeah.
been a learner her
Okay.
whole life. And there were seasons of parenting her where she challenged me in a great way
Yeah.
spiritually. I mean, she
That's
just loved the Lord from early.
yeah.
And just there were times where her faith was inspiring to me.
Nice. Yeah.
But again, to her point, you get to certain little seasons of life where that individuating happens, they start pulling away, and you panic a little because you don't want that. But at the same time, you think, okay, but that's what we're parenting toward. We're
Yeah.
parenting toward raising independent, adults who can take care of themselves in the real world. And that's what this looks like. That pulling away is as difficult as it was. I remember when it happened with Andrew, our oldest son. I I was like, oh, Andy, he doesn't talk anymore. I don't, he doesn't talk to me. I
Right.
can't have a conversation. And Andy had a chat with him and said, Andrew, when you come in the door, at least grunt toward your mom, after
Right.
school.
Right.
Allie was never really that way. She's
Yeah.
she's always been pretty verbal, and she would come in from school and just regurgitate her entire day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right as she walked in the door, Mom, you won't believe what happened today.
Yeah.
So, but
That's
to
awesome.
answer your question, there's some natural fears, I
Sure.
think,
Yeah.
and especially having done Andy and I together did well. After when we got married, we did 10 years of youth ministry,
Sure.
student ministry,
Yeah.
and you see everything
Sure.
in student ministry,
Right.
and so you see some things to fear,
Right. No. Right.
and so those were things that
No.
were tucked in the back of my mind
No.
that
Sure it is.
trying
And
to avoid.
and pastors' kids are still um, kids who are going to quite oftentimes join the culture on some stuff that goes against the grain of,
Sure.
what goes on in the church and whatnot. I mean, Andy, I remember hearing Andy speak or one of the books, where he had a few moments after church. He did
Yeah.
church a couple times and went and did something, and his dad kind of caught, and his dad did a great job with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the norm. Now,
But we
again,
did
I
have
don't,
that we did
I,
have that advantage of him growing up in a pastor's home, so he
right.
knew some of the things not to do
So
that I
good.
think made it a little bit
Yeah.
easier for our
So
kids.
good. I remember I was with the president of a university who's one of my best friends, and us. We were having a barbecue at our house, and he wanted to do a little devotion with the family. They have 3 kids. We have 3 kids, and he said, "Now, because we're in ministry, but we didn't really pressure you guys to be, any certain way. So you don't feel the pressure of being like, pastor type kids with us, do you?" And my daughter Christy and his son David went, "Are you kidding?" And it was a great insight for us because we were like, "Oh, we think we've passed this."
We felt
And
relieved.
again, I truly want to get to the book, but I've got to ask one more question. I don't think this was in the book, but I don't want to. I want to ask Allie about it. So, Allie, when you were younger, it sounds like the Stanley kids could raise their hand and say, "May I appeal?" Your parents
Yeah.
would do something. I think that is the funniest deal, but I love that. So,
Like we
just
were in
what?
court of some type.
Yeah, "May I appeal?" And
Yes,
then
ma'am.
did they ever go with you? I mean,
Uh,
or did they just go, "No, you can't appeal"?
No, sometimes we would have to go, "Yes, ma'am," or "Yes, sir," but
Yeah,
may I appeal? And then they
yeah.
were like, "No," or they would be like, "Sure," and then
Love
we
it,
could argue our
love it.
case. So
Sure,
it's
love it.
shocking that
yeah.
none of us became lawyers because I feel
Yeah,
like they weren't training us for ministry, they were training us for law, and we
so
just
good. No,
didn't.
There
that's
was we learned that in one of the parenting curriculums we did because in
yeah,
our small groups,
sure,
you do every parenting
sure.
curriculum that
Everyone,
comes along.
everyone.
So we learned this. It is kind of this interrupt rule,
Yeah,
where they would put their hand on your leg if they wanted to, if you're talking to someone else so they don't
yeah,
interrupt. And then
love
the
it.
may I appeal, instead of saying why or do I have to, or all those things,
Yeah,
they said, have them ask, may I appeal? Because there may be information you don't have.
yeah.
So looking back, I'm a little bit horrified about the whole
Oh,
thing,
I
but
love it.
it was effective.
No,
It
it'd be
was
effective and it'd
effective.
be good communication. I told my wife this a while back, and she just said, "Well, our kids just appealed. They didn't say, 'May I appeal?' We didn't
Yeah,
give they just appealed." So, that does happen. I
it's
wanna
all
get in
part of the homeschooling
Yeah,
package.
exactly. I wanna get into I think it's just any school,
Yeah,
the teenage package especially.
right.
But I wanna get into some of the conversations because I think everyone is incredible. We won't get to all of them. Um, but the first conversation that you talk about is, uh, foundations matter, and I thought that was very important to be at the beginning, and I thought what you had to say was it why did you come up with foundations matter, and what are you saying?
Yeah. Well, one of the things Allie and I really wanted to have plenty of scripture woven through the
Yeah,
entire book, and
yeah,
so the main passage we focused on was Philippians 4, and talked about that as it went through everything. But for us, as we talked about 8 things, really when we started brainstorming about this book, Jim, we were just trying to come up with what are the big topics that young
yeah,
girls are having to deal with,
mhm,
that would be and it would be beneficial for moms to have conversations with them ahead of time,
yeah,
before there's drama, before there's all difficulty and things going on. What are some topics we would want them to have ahead of time? So we brainstormed and came up with these topics, and we decided the very first chapter we want to lay a foundation of faith, because really, as
mhm,
we talk about these other topics,
yeah,
we want our girls' faith to inform decision making. We want their
right,
faith to inform
right,
fears, comparison, stress and anxiety, relationships with family, relationships with boys, all of the other topics. We really wanted to springboard off of foundation of faith. And there's so many moms who don't feel confident in really having faith conversations with their kids
yeah,
because they feel like they haven't had training, or maybe they're a new Christian and they're just kind of figuring stuff out. So we wanted the first chapter to really be a little bit of not heavy theology by any
no,
means, but hey, here's the foundation of faith. And certainly our first topic after that is about your identity and who
right,
you are and who
yeah,
God says you are. So understanding what Jesus did for you on the cross is
yeah,
foundational to understanding who you are in Christ.
yeah.
And then also comparison and all of the things that follow from
Yeah,
there.
it
Allie, you
really
want to say
fits
something?
in, and if you build the foundation right, then
Yes.
these other things kind of fit in. You mentioned the second conversation, and I really thought that was good, and I think a lot of times, you know, their identity is found in social media, Allie. I mean, the girls that you're talking to, they're looking on TikTok. I mean, they're getting their their identity is on with TikTok or, whatever the latest, greatest thing that they're looking at, YouTube, of course. How do you, and your mom used a scripture in that section, that we're created in the image of God.
Mhm.
And you had a phrase here, and I wrote it down: live out your identity.
Mhm.
So that's what you're saying to the girls. And then again, in the book, and this is for our YouTube folks, I'll find it now in the middle. So in the middle, there's a section called, activities right here. If you can see it, you can't, you who don't are on the podcast side, which is the vast majority of you are saying, what is he doing right now? But anyway, it's really good. I just happened to open it to something that Allie did on high school, kind of rules for high school. Is really cool. But you said, kind of more that idea of live out your identity. A lot of kids, I'm suggesting that a lot of middle schoolers, especially, but maybe the vast majority of people, they don't know their identity. They don't understand that they're rooted in Christ. They don't understand that they were created in the image of God. And that deals with their sexuality. It deals with who they are. It deals with the way that they look, the way they feel, their body image stuff. How do you help a middle schooler understand it? How does the mom who's going to have this discussion do that?
Yeah. Well, going back to identity, everybody has an identity, and
Yes.
it's being formed by school and friends and social media. And so, in the identity chapter, the first point is you have to see who you are. You have to
Yeah.
see who you actually are, not what the world tells you, not what your
Yeah.
friends tell
Super
you,
good.
not what culture is telling you you should or shouldn't be. Like, this is the truth of who you actually are.
Yeah.
And I think I mean, I think as adults, like, we need to constantly be renewing our minds of no, 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 this is who we are. So we have to keep the truth in front of us at all
Yeah.
times, or the loudness of culture will just swoop in and convince you that you're something else. And
Right.
so
Right.
understanding who you are really takes some intentionality. And I
Yes.
think that's a huge heart behind this book of, okay, we're putting the truth in front of you. We're reminding your mom who she is and helping her come
Right.
alongside you to
Right.
help put the truth in front of you. And then talking about what that means together, about what it looks like to actually
Yeah.
live it out. Because if you know who you are, that affects how you treat people, that affects how you date, that affects
Right.
how you
Yeah.
view yourself and your body and how you take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And
Right.
it affects everything. But I
Sure.
think it takes so much intentionality and to partner with your community, or at least your mom, to come
Yeah.
alongside you and
Right.
be reminding you of
Well,
this is who you
I
are. Yeah.
I I think you're right, and I think a lot of moms, when I was in student ministry, I always thought it was just the moms were all, they were messed up because the kids told me they were, and then I learned, oh no, these moms are on a pilgrimage too, and so in some ways, when it comes to being created in the image of God, these moms need to learn this too,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so what I see this every conversation of all 8, I see this as something that both moms and daughters are kind of learning together.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And a lot of times when I'm talking to adults about teaching their children sexual integrity, I have the parents are running it through a grid that they didn't live with some of that kind of
Right.
stuff, so they don't
Yeah.
want to have the conversations. But in this, the mom can say, "Hey, you know what? I'm still learning that I'm created in the image of God too, and
Mhm.
some of the decisions I possibly made that weren't the greatest decisions were
Mhm.
because I didn't understand that concept, and I want you to know that." And it's not a one-time deal. These conversations are not one-time conversations. You have a conversation like this with your middle schooler, it's then a continual conversation, not a lecture, but a dialogue.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
that's
and one of the things that we encourage moms to do in the mom well, for the benefit of those who can't see the book,
yeah,
I write 8 chapters in the beginning
yes,
of the book for the moms.
yeah,
Allie writes a corresponding 8
right,
chapters for the girls, and then we have a section called Meet Me in the Middle,
yeah,
where we just set them up to have some successful conversations. And one of the things, to your point, Jim, that we say to moms is, "Hey, be real with your daughter."
Mhm.
When y'all are having these conversations about fear,
right,
talk about the things that you're fearful of, and
yeah,
maybe the things that you remember being
yeah,
fearful of when you were her age. And it just sets the tone for daughters not to feel like they're being lectured, but
yeah,
that this is something we're doing together. These are conversations we're having. We're both learning,
right,
and that's just a far more effective way to communicate with your daughter
yeah,
once she
yeah,
becomes a teenager, especially.
right. I appreciate you saying that, Sandra, because we parent out of authenticity. It doesn't mean we parent out of
Yes.
perfection. And the
Mhm.
Bible says that the man or woman of integrity walks securely. And I think if they'll walk securely, then their kids will walk securely.
Yes.
But that's being authentic. And so I don't think we have to share all of our dirty war stories. I
Right.
just heard this from a woman who said I had said, somebody had asked me a question about, well, we were sexually promiscuous, my husband and I, before, and now we're teaching our kids about sex. Should we tell them all the stuff? And I said, I don't think you give them every war story. I think you say, I'm passionate about this because we didn't always do this, and we would rather have you make better decisions than us.
Mm-hmm.
And so she got her daughter, she was going through this thing with her daughter, and her daughter says, well, what about you? And she, instead of saying, well, you should see what I did in high school, she just simply said, I have a passion for it because I didn't always do this well.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I understand, so when a mom can say, I understand that I'm created in the image of God, that's amazing. And that relates not just to sexuality, but it relates to so many of them.
Sure.
I want to jump to the next one because I think it's critical, especially for middle school girls, maybe all of us, but no win in comparison.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a huge thing with students. It's a huge thing for all of us. I mean,
Everybody.
To be honest, Allie, your dad and Sandra, your husband, I'll say sometimes to people when I'm doing pastor training, I'll say, you're not Andy Stanley. Okay. He doesn't, you guys may think there was a moment when his sermon wasn't as good as last week's. I'm like, how does he do this every week?
I agree.
So people play the comparison thing and go, I'm not even close to this guy. Well, they don't have to be. So how do you help them understand that conversation in conversation?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we say there's two people in the world, people who know that they struggle with comparison and people who don't, but are still struggling with comparison.
That's right.
Because it is
Great
a
line.
constant,
Yeah.
it's just constantly in front of us.
We don't outgrow it.
No, we don't. And so our two takeaways from that chapter are to celebrate what God has given others and to leverage what God has given you.
So good.
And so celebrating what God has given others, this is that thing of your heart will follow your actions. So for the girls, if someone makes the volleyball team and they didn't make the volleyball team, to choose to write them a congratulations note or send them cookies and say, hey, I'm so proud of you. That was really hard and you did it. And just choose to celebrate other people, because then that jealousy just will shrink over time.
Well, you
and
said
then
the word.
leveraging what
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
No, leveraging what God has given you, which is when we're comparing, we don't see the gifts that God has given us and the talents and all of the things. And so taking those, recognizing them and using them to help other people or help yourself. Yeah.
No, that's so good. And you use the word intentionality. And, when they have a foundation, like you've talked about, when they have these other things, then they have a foundation, they can handle that better. If you don't, you do compare. That's all you can do. Then we play the comparison, and adults do this too.
Mm-hmm.
But for kids, if they would quit playing the comparison game, because, there's always going to be somebody smarter, cuter, better grades in school and, more money, whatever it is. And so we have to teach them that this is the kind of stuff that parents don't talk to their kids about a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking more transactional. Do you have dance recital today at 4, right? So be ready. Did you do your homework? Things like that. So listen, we're going to have to take a quick break. We'll be right back. And when we come back, and before I say that, let me just say all the information on Sandra and Allie are in our show notes, and also about the wonderful book, Meet Me in the Middle. Again, those of you on YouTube get to see the book. It's a great cover. And anyway, it's all in our show notes. When we come back, we're going to talk about family is forever. And also, I'm going to make a startling announcement about Sandra Stanley and dark chocolate. It's startling. We're going to be right back.
I'm Erin Mashaw, and I want to invite you into an honest conversation about one of life's most awkward yet important topics, sex.
Conversations about sex can bring up all kinds of weird emotions, not the least of which is awkward. But that's not a reason to avoid the topic altogether.
So, if everybody's doing it, then what's the big deal?
Where do you go with your questions? There are lots of voices telling you who you are, how to dress, what to think, how to feel. So how do we know what to listen to? Who can we trust to guide us?
When we treat others with radical respect, we honor God. We make our lives and relationships better, and we reflect God's love to the world all around us.
Now, I know you might be thinking, what? I don't need guardrails. I have good intentions, but what if intention isn't enough?
And as you think about the path from where you are now to where you want to be, Who are the friends that can help you get there?
You'll hear personal stories, helpful advice, and truth from the Bible about how to make wise choices when it comes to love, sex, and dating.
Imagine being able to look back on this stage of your life without regrets about the way you handled relationships. You're not going to get there by accident. You're going to have to decide in advance what guardrails to put in place to get to where you want to be.
Join us for a student's guide to sexual integrity.
Welcome back. I'm Jim Burns. So happy to have Sandra and Allie with us today. We're talking about their book called Meet Me in the Middle. I'm suggesting you pick this up if you've got kids who are of student age. And actually, you know what? You can learn a lot. And you know what? I know it's for moms and daughters, but men, you can learn something. I mentioned that I've read this thing and it's very, very good. It's a great way for, I thought, I wish I would have had some of the content to talk to my girls like that, because my influence with my girls is different than Kathy's, but it was still so key. However, I did mention, Sandra, that I had this startling announcement, and I want to say this: you're the only woman I know. Okay, now there's other women I'm sure out there, but you're the only woman I know who does not like dark chocolate. Plus, you went to an inferior chocolate called milk chocolate. Give me a break. What is the deal with that?
Oh, I don't know.
This was also startling for me to find out in the book writing process. I didn't know.
You didn't know it. You read that.
She's lived a lie.
I love chocolate. I just don't love dark chocolate.
Yeah.
And I think my whole life, because I'm an exerciser, I'm a health nut. My hobby is health and nutrition. That's just kind of the way it's been for about 3 decades. I have pretended to love dark chocolate because healthy people are supposed to love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I confess that. And particularly, I apologize to my oldest son, who almost always gave me dark chocolate for gifts. And, just about every year.
Yeah. Well, Andy liked that because he'd get,
he likes dark chocolate. I don't hate it. Yeah. And I can enjoy a little bit. But if I'm honest, and you put a piece of milk chocolate in front of me or dark chocolate, I'm going milk every time.
Okay. Well, that's good. I'm just telling you, we're going to pray for you. And it's an inferior chocolate, but that's another problem we'll talk about later.
I know it is.
Family is forever. I'm writing a book right now on adult children who stray from faith. And so they stray from faith, they violate values. It's all the tough stuff. What's interesting about it is 27% of adult children say that they are estranged from some person in their family. It could be a dad, it could be who's gone, it could be, a brother, sister, whatever. It's shocking. 1 out of 4. It's just shocking. Wow. That's a statistic in America. And you read it over and over again. But what you're saying is, and I love that you brought this up, because a lot of times we don't bring this up in these kinds of content things. Family is forever. What does that mean?
Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take this. I mean, so we start off the chapter by talking about my wedding, which was very emotional. I've never.
And he got on his knees to propose to you. He got on his knee to propose to you.
Yeah, he did.
Like he's an all-time good guy.
He's a good guy. Yeah, I'm a fan.
But we got married just as COVID was setting in, and so we ended up uninviting every single person that wasn't our family. Yeah. And that was like I said, I don't have any sisters, so my whole bridal party was cut. Just very emotional and intense, but getting married, looking around and seeing my family, it really was that moment of, these are the people that are going to be in my life forever.
Right.
Friends come and go, some stay forever, and that's wonderful and amazing, but these are the people that I can count on. And so, and I think for girls, specifically middle school and high school girls, when it comes to family, they feel very much like they have no say and no control, and they didn't choose their family, and their mom makes all the rules and their dad makes them do stuff. And so they have zero control. And so my hope and prayer for this chapter was to give them 3 things that they actually do have some control over when it comes to their family. So I go through, you can choose to appreciate, you can choose to forgive, which I think is huge. And I think forgiveness, or a lack of forgiveness, is a huge reason why adults don't speak to each other still.
Exactly.
Because there's a lack of forgiveness there. And then the last one, you can choose gentleness, which goes back to our Philippians passage.
Yeah. Which I love that you chose gentleness. When I read those 3, circled them. we probably don't talk enough about that, how we have to be gentle within our family,
Mhm.
kind,
Especially
kindness
among
matters.
siblings,
Yeah, you're right. Right.
because honestly, Jim, you talked about how you wondered if your girls would all even like each
Right.
other when they
Seriously.
grow up.
Yeah.
That's the way it was with us and with me and my two siblings. I
Yeah.
think my mom kind of felt the same way, and we are all so close now. So for
Right.
the parents who are struggling in the middle of that, who might be listening, there really is hope on the other side of it, and gentleness is a part of it.
Yes.
And having conversations about that, I think, really does help with that.
Yeah.
Now, I would also concede that most parents might be rolling their eyes right now going, yeah, gentleness is so far down the list of what we're trying to achieve right now.
Right.
But really, to have a conversation of, hey, these are the people who are going to be walking with you through every season
Yeah.
of your whole life.
Yeah.
These are the ones that aren't going away.
No,
So
you're
let's
right.
talk about how to nurture those relationships.
So good. I have a brother who we've had fires here in California, and he lost his home.
Oh,
And
sorry.
when I got to him right away, my two of the three of the daughters had already gotten to him, and one then ended up yesterday. I was with him for dinner. My wife and I had dinner with he and his wife, and they have nothing because they just left, so they didn't have anything. And she had packed. She'd gone to Costco and she bought him clothes, which cracks me up. He's 80 years old, and I would love to see what the clothes are that my daughter bought him. But she goes, oh, he needs to he needs to make it better, a little better here.
Yeah.
But what I loved was that, they couldn't do it for everybody, but they could do it for a family member. And then he
Right.
wrote me this tear-jerking, text about our kids and, support and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, families, we need to let our kids understand that, because right at that time of middle school, moving on to high school, they are individuating. So they're moving sometimes away from family. That's normal.
Yep.
But you have to see that you move away, but then you can kind of come back.
You
too.
choose to come back. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I realize there's people in very difficult situations,
Of
and
course.
forgiveness is the thing that they heard you say, Allie.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's so critical. And again, we're going to run out of time here, but finding your people, I think it has to be close to the top for a middle schooler, for a high schooler, especially. No, for all of us. Fine. I'm in a small group. I just was there. 5 people. We've been doing it for 22 years. Same people. They're my people. I'm a better husband. I'm a better father. I'm a better Christ follower because of these amazing men that I'm with. But yet sometimes you see with peer, there's negative peer pressure, but there's also positive peer influence. How do we get that across to them?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to take that? You
Got it.
did such a great job
He's on a
talking
roll,
about
Sandra.
No,
Yeah.
I think I do. When we were going to write this book, I was like, we have to write about friends and boys. And originally they were going to be 2 different chapters, but we ended up putting them together because a lot of the same principles apply to best friendships and romantic relationships.
Yeah.
And so we want our girls to have healthy friendships. Like you said, positive pressure can be good and help. I know in my life, I had 2 best friends, and they made me who I am today in a really positive way.
Yeah.
And so we walk through the different seasons of a relationship, of before you're really close, what questions to ask, what are you really looking for, do they make you better, do they make you worse? Then we go through when you're in that relationship, whether a romantic relationship while you're dating or while you're best friends and while they have a lot of influence over you. Here are the things to be looking out for, Are you sacrificing your future for someone who might not even be in your future? That's a concept that I think middle school and high school girls will not think about on their own. And then the last one is after the relationship is over, whether once again it's a breakup or you just kind of grow apart. Some friendships will last forever. Obviously, some people marry their high school sweetheart, and that is crazy. But sometimes it happens. But if that relationship does end, we're still called to love them. We're not called to cause drama and make up rumors about them and get them back for whatever you feel like they did to you. We're still called to love. And I think a lot of times, specifically in the church world, we don't really touch on that. We just kind of talk about who to date, how to date. But it's like, okay, but how do we still look like Jesus as we're ending relationships and as we are no longer in those.
Yeah. Very few people, I love that you said that, because very few people ever teach anyone how to end a relationship. I mean, even people, you're dating somebody. I mean, I never knew. I mean, it's not like I was like Mr. Dater, but I didn't know how to end a relationship.
Yeah.
And
when I was in middle school and I had a boyfriend,
I wondered if you were going to say this.
I really wanted to break up with him for probably like 6 months. I just didn't know how or have the courage to. I was in the 7th grade. Every day my dad would drive me to school and we would practice. And he
would
would be
role
my
play.
boyfriend and I would be me.
Yeah.
And I would practice breaking up with him. And then he would get home from work and he would go, "Did you do it?" And I was like, "No, I didn't do it."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
But what I would add to this particular discussion, and Allie touched on one of them, there were really two things during a relationship, whether it's a friendship or a little romantic relationship, little boyfriend, whatever. The two things we want moms to be able to kind of wrap some conversation around is don't trade what you want most for what you want in the moment. And what Allie alluded to, don't let your future be influenced by those who won't even be in your future. Those are two big ideas in this chapter.
Yeah.
And that we really want moms to grab onto and have conversations with their girls.
Sandra, that is so good. If just that conversation with your daughter, and we don't have those kind of things. I mean, you have modeled, Sandra, so well, just even hearing this, how we parent. We don't parent, we're not perfect. But we have to have these kinds of conversations, and even what Andy did with you is really cool. That your dad, did it, and then you didn't do what he said. It was awesome.
I did eventually. I didn't marry him.
Eventually you did, because you got to, he's the kid's gone now, but maybe he's hearing this for the first time. Who knows?
Could be.
Have you ever heard this podcast?
Sorry, it was 6 months in the making.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Listen, I can't believe we're done. I'm kind of bummed because I wanted to talk about fear is not in charge of your life. The stuff you did on fear is great. Peace in the chaos, and then writing a good story is amazing. But you're going to have to go get this book. This sounds like an infomercial. We don't do this here on HomeWord, but this has become an infomercial. But you can see why. You can see why I like this so much. And I love that moms and daughters can talk about this stuff. And by the way, when your kids are younger, and a lot of you have littles, you can have conversations and you begin it, but in the next phase, the phase of the teenagers, which is actually harder to sometimes have those communications, this is what you do. And what's great about it is this particular book is just a great resource for you. And you know what? If they, kind of roll their eyes, so let that be. Some of the eye rolling that happened in our life with our girls, now they appreciate it, but they didn't appreciate it.
Those are the things they remember and appreciate the most.
Exactly. So anyway, Sandra, Allie, you are amazing. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having us, Jim.
Thank you.
Well, what great conversation. This is such good. And like I said, it's such important stuff. Moms, don't expect, like I said, every conversation to go perfectly with your daughter. Right. It may not, or actually with your son for that matter. Okay.
Yeah.
I've never heard anybody go, that was like the perfect conversation when Kathy took the girls away at a certain age, talking about the, sex and sexuality, and, one of them engaged, the other went, God does not want you to talk to me about this. And the other ones, I already know all this stuff. So all three of them had different conversations. So parents, have the conversations like the ones we're talking about. Because like I said, we talk about school, we talk about dance recitals, we talk about sports, all kinds of things. But sometimes we lack the discipline. I'm putting that on us as parents, the discipline to have the conversations about the important things. So
even if you have to give up some other things or make some sacrifices with some other areas,
so,
investing this amount of time on this level of conversation with your girls.
So good. You're raising the level. That's so good. So anyway, these conversations are great. We have listeners and watchers on YouTube from all over the world, and I can't begin to tell you how honored I am that you stopped by today to join us on this podcast. I get it. I'm doing it as almost like a listener on this one, and I'm taking notes on these too. If you want help for parenting, there's lots of places you can go. HomeWord is one of them. Home, HOME, word, WORD, one word.com. Lots of great resources. And the values at HomeWord are 4: strong marriages, confident parents, empowered kids, and healthy leaders. That's what we're all about. So no doubt there is something on that list or on our website that could help you. And we're grateful to all of you for, listening to the podcast. If you can subscribe, that's awesome on all the various podcast networks. Until next time, I'm Jim Burns, and you are listening to HomeWord. Thanks so much.